Welcome to the Pacific Research Institute's Next Round podcast. I'm Rowena Ichon, Senior Vice President, and with me is Tim Anaya, Senior Director of Communications.
Hi, Ro. Looking forward to diving into the budget.
Yes, so Tim spent a good part of his Friday looking at the governor's May revised budget. And I looked at the press release and I thought to myself, it's not raining water in California. It is raining money, folks. It's a blizzard of money. The budget total is about $268 billion, $40 billion above the original January budget. He's also proposing $100 billion in new economic assistance, which he's calling a quote generational budget. And California is already getting about $26 billion from the stimulus package. So it sounds pretty complicated, billions here, billions there. Kim, how about trying to unpack it for us?
Well, that's the staggering thing, is that $26 billion in federal money that we're getting in the Biden stimulus plan, that's on top of the $75 billion surplus that we're projecting. And just for context, remember a year ago at this time, when we were in the midst of the COVID crisis, it was $54 billion. So when you hear people talk about California's budget volatility, it doesn't get more volatile than that. Newsom talked about this budget doesn't play small ball, and truer words have never been said. I mean, it's staggering the amount of spending that he's proposing. Some of about $12 billion will be for tax rebates. He's expanding what he calls his Golden State stimulus. So taxpayers who make up to $75,000 a year and didn't get the first check will get this one. And then families with dependents and undocumented families will get another $500. Assemblyman James Gallagher called that the recall refund, and I think something like that might catch on. But really, I think if you go through the governor's plan, it's really just spending. We're going to spend $12 billion to combat homelessness. But, are we making progress with what we're already spending? We have this Project Room Key and Home Key that are building new housing and buying hotels and things and turning them into housing. Newsom calls those revolutionary programs. But if you read what our team, Kerry Jackson, Wayne Weingarten, what they write in our great book on homelessness, No Way Home, they make pretty clear more of the same isn't the answer, that we should be supporting private charities and nonprofits rather than just throwing more money at government programs. And I think if you ask anybody walking down the street, homelessness is worse and more visible than ever before, despite all of this spending that we've been doing. Last thing I would say is my big question looking at all of this is, Gray Davis learned the lesson the hard way in the late 90s and early 2000s when he spent billions of dollars of the dot-com money in the budget on new permanent spending and programs. That money turned out to be one-time money, and then the budget crashed and burned. We actually took, 15 years or more to dig out from that mess. So with all of this huge amount of spending that we're entering into, and the governor says, this is not new one-time money for one-time purposes, but is it really? The scale of some of these programs and this spending is not. So it really makes you wonder, are we setting ourselves up for another budget cliff and crash? When you see we have the inflation numbers, you have the very disappointing jobs numbers. Well, we better be hoping the good times roll because, they say when California sneezes, America gets a cold. It doesn't take much, as we saw last year, for record budget surpluses to turn into record budget deficits.
Well, I'm going to go out on a limb because we're always criticizing the governor. I'm going to mention a few things that I like about the budget. I like the spending on fire prevention, for more fire equipment, for better forest management. So, $2 billion is not a lot. It's to help out the fire stations, buy more equipment, better forest management. So I think that's a good thing. He's got some grants to small businesses, and we don't know the particulars of that. And I should say that we're going to try to take a deep dive on some of this spending over the next couple of weeks through our blog, Right by the Bay. So we're going to do a little more research on each of these spending categories. But small businesses have been covered. What kind of grants are they going to get? We'll see. So we're going to take a look at that. The issue about the tax rebates. Now, intuitively, I love tax rebates. I love giving money back to the people because I think they'll be a lot better at spending it than the state government. The question is whether this is too much and whether people will stay home and not work because of all this freebie money coming around. I mean, my mother, she's 90 years old. She got $1,200 first COVID relief, and then she got another $600, and then she's going to get $1,400. And then I guess the state's going to give her another $600. So that's a heck of a lot of money for a little lady that stays home most of the day. So she thinks it's a hoot. And then, the infrastructure spending. Obviously, we've all had flat tires, and through all of these potholes, and freeways are just jammed every day. And we sure could use more infrastructure spending here in the state, but will we actually see that money go to projects that are needed to widen our freeways, fix the potholes, et cetera? We just don't know, And also, he did say something about broadband, which I like the idea. I mean, we saw the weaknesses, our lack of broadband, especially in rural areas. A lot of the older seniors couldn't have access to telehealth. The schools didn't have good broadband. And I think we could spend some money there. Well, I like what Julian Morris had proposed when it comes to broadband. Julian Morris is at Reason. He thought that it would be better to give vouchers to families to buy broadband rather than state building out their own or working with companies and subsidizing it.
Well, one final point on infrastructure, which we talked about last week on the podcast with Bob Poole, even though he's kind of been for it and kind of been against it, this budget doubles down on high-speed rail. We're getting back that kind of money that was federal money that was in the Trump administration, yanked it away. Biden, we're apparently on the cusp of getting an agreement from the feds to send that money back to California. I think it's about $900 million. And then it would authorize the rest of the $4.2 billion left over from the Prop 1A bond to continue and finish the construction on that first leg, the train to nowhere leg of the train in the middle of the Central Valley. So, if we're continuing to double down this money there, I think that answers our question on, is infrastructure spending elsewhere actually expanding road capacity and fixing big potholes and other problems with our existing infrastructure?
Let's turn to the drought, which is the subject of our podcast today. So last week, the governor declared a drought emergency that's now up to 41 California counties. And those out-of-staters who listen to this podcast, that's 41 of the 58 counties in California. Now, here in Southern California, where I'm at, we're actually in pretty good shape. Just read over the weekend that the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California, we've got reserves that should take us through the year. In Southern California, we get a lot of our water from the Colorado River. We get a little bit from the Sierra Nevada. But Tim, that's an entirely different situation for you guys up north.
Well, of course, we do have water in Northern California. You just all take it in Southern California. But yes, it's definitely been a very dry winter. The snowpack is very low. The melting snowpack, of course, is how we get a lot of our water. And then when you see the governor announced last week, he did kind of a little campaign style tour around the state announcing the different parts of his plan. And the governor announced a $5.1 billion water drought response plan over 4 years, and what he calls, quote, improved climate resilience. Well, when you look through that, you see a lot of spending here for, groundwater. That's good. For improved conveyance. That's important. You see, flood risk. We do have huge flood risk here. The Sacramento area is second to New Orleans for their flood risk. People don't Many people don't realize that. But then you see a lot of money for, climate type things, for protecting fish. And what's missing is money to increase water storage. We've been talking about it since 2014. We worked on and passed a bipartisan historic water bond that had the funding to build 2 critical above ground water storage projects in California. We're still waiting. That money has been held up by the state and siphoned off to other purposes, despite the clear intent of the legislature and the voters. So, a lot of this money is good and important and needed, but you're not going to really make a difference until we build the new above ground water storage that we need as part of an all of the above way to look at our water infrastructure.
With a drought will come wildfires. And already here in Southern California, today over the weekend, we had big fire at Pacific Palisades. Don't think it's been contained yet. So Tim, you've got drought, we've got fire, we have blackouts, high unemployment, but the polls still say that at least for now, Newsom is going to likely beat the recall effort.
Yeah, I mean, we just saw the latest numbers come out last week, and it's pretty clear that the voters are kind of mixed on the people who are running. And, this $100 billion California comeback plan comes at a good time for a governor fighting to keep his job. It's when you can play Santa Claus and go all over the state and have a little something for everybody, it certainly lowers the temperature and reduces the anger of Californians who were upset over the governor's handling of COVID and, of course, the infamous French Laundry incident.
That was a very expensive dinner for not only his group there, but also for taxpayers in the state. So as we mentioned, our featured topic for this podcast is a drought, and our guest is Steve Greenhut, who authored PRI's book, Winning the Water Wars. Steve is a veteran California journalist, also the Western Region Director of R Street Institute. He also does a lot of writing for the Reason Foundation. So Steve does a great job of putting the drought into context and analyzes some of the proposals coming out of Sacramento. This is, as we all know, the hottest issue, no pun intended, in California right now. So we always get a huge audience when we talk about water. So thank you all for listening, and we think you'll find this very informative. Welcome to Next Round, Steve.
Thanks for having me.
Well, just a few years after California finally emerged from its last painful drought, we've got another drought before us. So how did we get here? What have state officials done to prepare us for the drought? And what haven't they done that put us in this situation again?
Yeah, the problem is 4 years ago, Jerry Brown announced, the end of the drought, and everyone was happy because it started raining again. And now our state government went on to other things, and there hasn't been a dramatic amount of planning to deal with water infrastructure and other. We you know how it is in California. We just move on from crisis to crisis and never really fix the last crisis. So yeah, 4 years goes by quickly. We had COVID, we had a national election. We didn't do the things that needed to be done. Now some of these things need to be done over years and maybe even decades. And the state just isn't building the infrastructure. We're not even maintaining the infrastructure. And we're still just going along, allowing environmental interests to continue to fight every project. And that's how we are. That's where we are today. And it's probably where we'll be years from now. Even after this coming drought subsides, I don't see any signs that anyone's learning the lesson.
Steve, several commentators and activists have declared that California is on the verge of a quote-unquote mega drought. What have you found in your research on this? Just how bad is the drought facing Californians this summer?
Well, the drought we're facing is looking really bad. I was looking on the government drought data, and like 99% of the state is unusually dry, and an overwhelming majority of it is in some sort of severe drought or situation or worse. And it's true throughout much of the West. So it looks like a bad drought. Now, people who use the term mega drought, it's hyperbole. I mean, activists have been talking about a mega drought when we weren't aren't even in a drought. And, it's just this type of, I think, exaggeration. I'm not a climatologist, so I don't know. Maybe there is some spectacular drought that's coming. Their argument is this might be as bad as droughts in the dark ages, ones that could change suggest a change in the climate to levels we haven't seen in hundreds of years. I think it's just an effort to scare the public a bit about climate change to promote kind of a broader agenda of climate policies. And although I think there is some level of climate change, I don't appreciate this kind of attention, headline grabbing sort of thing. There are things we need to do, or that our state government needs to do, to assure that we have enough water for the people who live here. And if there is a severe climate change or not, those things will help no matter what the climate throws our way. And we need to build more infrastructure and develop more water resources regardless of the climate. So I just see it as somewhat of hyperbole.
Steve, you wrote in a recent column for the American Spectator that climate change activists are using the prospect of California's latest drought to say, see, I told you so, and push for more restrictions on the economy and people's lives. What big government policies are they pushing for this time?
Yeah, we see it constantly, even in Governor Newsom's, executive action on the drought. There's all this reference to climate change. I just think they're using this to advance a broader agenda. And one of those things is a plan to ban the sale of internal combustion engine vehicles. What is it now? Oh, I forget what year, 2030 or whatever, or 2045, I believe. Just far enough out that they won't be held accountable when the marketplace, may or may not catch up with their edicts. Yeah, it's just part of the whole political thing where we could just, whenever there's a drought, there's the obligatory discussion of climate change. And again, I'm not saying there isn't climate change, but any sort of, droughts come and go and have come and gone throughout the state and throughout the world. So it's just a matter, like Tom McClintock would say, droughts are nature's fault, but water shortages are our fault. And the book is focused. What do we do about water shortages? How do we provide enough water regardless of what the climate happens to be doing?
Now, since the last multi-year drought impacted the Golden State, Californians have taken significant steps to reduce water usage and become more water efficient. But that hasn't stopped Sacramento from pushing for more water restrictions. Now, talk about this new individual water use targets that are coming online soon, and other measures to restrict water use that we can expect coming down the pipeline.
Californians have really met basically every one of the aggressive conservation targets. I mean, conservation, we hear this constant talk about the need for conservation and low flow toilet and low flow shower heads. We've done all that, and Californians have met the challenge. I mean, you just look back year after year, individuals have met the challenge. I was in neighboring Arizona. The state uses less water now than it did, I believe, in the 70s, and the population's like 7 times what it was then. So people are using less water for a variety of reasons, some based on pricing, some based on mandates, some based on just good stewardship. So we are meeting the needs. But 50% of the state's water flows out to the Pacific Ocean, largely unimpeded. It's the environmental use of water. 40% is for ag, 10% is for residential and commercial uses. It's only about 5.7% for residential uses. So focusing on conservation in an area that's just a tiny portion of the overall water use in the state is fairly counterproductive. I'm all for conservation. Yes, let's conserve, but it's just not going to get us where we need to get. Now, Governor Brown signed a law that I think will require individuals to limit their use to 55 gallons a day. That was misreported by some conservative sources as an individual mandate. In other words, if you take too long showers or wash the car, and I'm fanatical about washing my car, that I might get an inspector come and fine me. That's not true. The restrictions are on individual water districts, and they are being prodded to develop policies that limit use. But then those standards are the amounts are going to go down and down and down. And I could see a day where these end up being individual mandates, where people could be eventually, fined for using too much water. And again, that's not what's going to solve the problem. What we need is to promote water abundance, more water into the system so that people and farms, and we do need farms. The Central Valley is one of the great agricultural regions in the entire world, and people need to eat. And, we need more water, and we can do that without, dramatically changing our lives. But a lot of the environmental folks and state officials, they just view conservation and even rationing as an end in and of itself. It's like they're happier when we're suffering.
So many political observers have said that Governor Newsom is poised to take an uncharacteristically light hand in ordering statewide water restrictions due to the looming recall election. What do you think about this? Will the governor avoid taking actions that would normally be at the top of his agenda to avoid angry voters?
Yeah, I'm having a hard time figuring out the governor on any number of levels, but on water policy, because he's been okay, right? So he hasn't proposed any great visions. He's giving short shrift to the infrastructure building that we need to do. So there's not any great plan, and we definitely need a plan. So I'm very critical of him at that level. But at the same token, he's been supportive, maybe not as supportive as I'd like to see, but he's been supportive of a desalination plant in Huntington Beach. When I talk to state water officials, they're not knee-jerk opposed to completing water infrastructure projects. In fact, they point to Sites Reservoir, the off-stream proposed reservoir in the Sacramento Valley that's been on the books for years, and they are still, even though they cut back the size of the tunnels through the Delta from twin tunnels to a single tunnel, they're moving ahead with environmental impact reports, even maybe too slowly. We have to fix that logjam in the Delta, and he's made some appointments to water boards that are basically pro water, and he's trying to build bridges in the Central Valley with the farm community. At the same token, he opposed some of the Trump administration efforts to allow more water go to farmers, and his executive statements are filled with the usual blather about, not blather, but the usual discussions of climate change. So I'm not really sure what he's doing, but I doubt that he will impose strict water restrictions. I also doubt, and I think the recall could, he's got political considerations, but I also doubt that he will propose a plan that strongly advocates for more water storage. And that's what we need, storing more water in wet years so we have it in dry ones. So yeah, it's kind of a middle of the road take on him.
Let's go through some of the ongoing unresolved issues in California's water wars and discuss where we are today and how the drought impacts these debates. So what's the latest with the Delta and efforts to build now one tunnel rather than the two proposed by former Governor Jerry Brown?
Well, it's still alive, and as I understand it, it still doesn't need legislative approval, and the governor is still supportive of it, and we're working through the whole environmental impact portion of it, which is, years-long process. I think it's probably an exaggeration, but I'm guessing it would take it took longer to do an environmental impact statement today than it would to build the entire state water project. So yeah, it's moving along. I just haven't heard the governor address it very much. Nothing I've seen shows that he's being a particularly strong advocate of it. But the problem in the Delta, it's improving the conveyance system. It's kind of like, the alternative to the peripheral canal proposal that would have taken water from the Sacramento River as it heads into the Delta from the north and kind of separate the water delivery from the tangled web of water arteries in the Delta, which is the West Coast's largest estuary and has thousands of miles of waterways. So the water heads from the Sacramento River, it gets tangled up in the Delta, and then you'll find a Delta smelt at the pumping station down at the south end in Tracy, and then the pumps stop. So the idea, and the peripheral canal was defeated at a statewide initiative because Northern Californians opposed it at like 90% levels, and Southern Californians had their typical whatever attitude. They were okay with it, but maybe not, but not at a strong enough levels. So this is the follow up to that, which would be tunnel under the Delta. restore the habitats. The delta is declining. The subsidence is severe, where the land keeps sinking. Saltwater intrusion is problematic. Something needs to be done. Northern Californians, they just view it as a Southern California water grab. But I do think it's important to solve that conveyance problem. However, it wouldn't necessarily provide any more water. It's just a way to get the water around the tangled estuary. But it's part of the water fix. I'd like to see them push it a little harder.
Steve, where are we with efforts to build more above ground water storage? Senate President Pro Tem Tony Atkins has proposed yet another water plan this session, seemingly focused on the low-hanging fruit and avoiding funding fights for new infrastructure that she argues would be too difficult to achieve right now. Is she right? And what do you make of her plan?
Yeah, I was looking at her plan, and I've got obviously nothing's going to happen the way I think it should. I think most of these things ought to be funded with water resources ought to be funded with revenue bonds. They ought to be focused on infrastructure. This program is mostly helping people deal with some of the impacts of drought. Helping deal with. There's a new sustainable groundwater management law, which has led to fallowed fields, and so it looks like community grants to deal with that. It does provide some money, there's $500 million in emergency drought water use efficiency improvement. A lot of it is about conservation, which again, I'm not against conservation, but it's not it's not going to be the be all end all solution. There is finally some money to help, poor areas where people don't have potable drinking water. It's just a grab bag of grants and spending to help ameliorate the ill effects of the drought. $285 million protecting fish and wildlife from drought impact, improving water data, improving water quality. I mean, it's hard to be opposed to any of this stuff per se, but we'd be foolish to think that it's going to really solve the problem. There is some money for improving groundwater storage, which is we need more storage underground or above ground.
You write about in Winning the Water Wars efforts in Israel and other countries that have adopted desalination, which, while expensive, was the key to stabilizing their water future, and it may be the key to stabilizing California's water future as well. Now, there are a pair of desalination projects in Southern California that have proven very difficult to get built, despite the fact that Governor Newsom supports them. Looking at it realistically, do you think that more water from desalination will ultimately become part of our water mix in the coming decades?
Yeah, I think desal is a good idea. And so, as you know from my book, I promote abundance. So all of the above. Let's do variety of things. Now, it's true that desalinated water is more expensive than imported water, but through technology, the price is coming down, and the price of imported water is going up. And as we head into another drought, mega drought or garden variety drought, the price of that water should go up. Now, we do need a better pricing system, which I have a chapter in the book. The prices we pay for water is only kind of tangentially related to its scarcity, but water prices are going to go up, and that there's going to be a price compression. And you build infrastructure of any type, not for today, but you build it for a few years down the road. So I think these projects have taken years to get approvals. So the one in Huntington Beach, which is similar to the one in Carlsbad, the Coastal Commission has been holding it up over concerns about plankton, and the environmental groups, I don't know. I have a hard time believing they're really concerned about plankton. I see a lot of these efforts, and just my theorizing or maybe somewhat about growth control. But Governor Newsom has supported the project. He did replace a water board member who seemed to be critical of the project, but he hasn't done a whole lot. I mean, the latest staff plan dealing with it has a poison pill. Essentially, it would provide the permits to the Poseidon plant in Huntington Beach, but they couldn't get the permits until they got all the permits for all their many mitigation projects that they're required to do. Well, those projects can take years of planning, so that could delay it. years down the road. And I think the governor, if he would weigh in on that, it might help get the approvals that are necessary. But bottom line is, yes, it's an expensive form of water, but the Pacific is there. So in a severe drought, we would know we'd have that water. We just have to pay more for it. And there's a desal proposal up in Marina near Monterey, which has been opposed on social justice grounds, which doesn't make any sense. And that area is severely, tapped out of water, and it's destroying the Carmel River. So having a desalination plant would help restore a river. So it's good for the environment. And as you mentioned, Israel solved its existential water problems. The 6-Day War was fought to some degree over water, and now Israel has plenty of water and can provide it to its neighbors. And they've used desalination is the main way they've solved their water problem, and it's just part of the solution here. I'm not saying it's the entire solution, but it's part of the solution.
It's also been argued that a free market solution, a water market system, could be the most effective way to allocate water and ensure that farmers and other industrial water users aren't overusing a precious commodity. Do you think that a water market system could solve the water shortage that we have today? And how feasible do you think a water market system would be in the Golden State?
Yeah, I advocate for better water markets, allowing water to be bought, sold, and traded. I mean, it's an improvement. The whole state has been plumbed essentially, and mostly through different government projects. So it's always hard. It's kind of like with the interstate highway system. How do you impose market reforms on a system that was fundamentally designed by the government? But we really need those reforms. I reprinted a chart in the book that shows it's a decision chart, the water transfer decision tree. So it's legal now for farms and water rights holders to buy and trade water, but the process is like one of those Rube Goldberg contraptions, right? Where it's such a long and convoluted process. If you buy and sell anything, let's say you want to sell a stock, if you have to wait a year and a half before you get government approval, well, the whole market will change. So what it does is the current bureaucratic process stifles the buying and selling. And some places I go into detail about how Australia attempted to put a price on water. And a lot of the environmentalists, they like to use lingo like water is something of such inherent value that it shouldn't have a price on it. Well, actually putting a price on it would assure that we have more of it, and that it could be, could help the environment and as well as help people. So pricing and market reforms. Another thing in the market area is allow water rights holders. There's certain private projects that have been proposed, like the Cadiz water project in the Mojave Desert, where water rights holders can tap an aquifer the size of Rhode Island and pump the water into the Colorado River aqueduct and send it towards Southern California. But the environmentalists in the state legislature and U.S. Senator Dianne Feinstein have been opposing that over kind of generalized environmental concerns. But the reports I've seen show that it's not going to cause any harm to the environment. So that's like a no-brainer project. Projects like that won't solve everything. Pricing won't solve everything, but it will help. It's one of the mix of solutions that we need to consider.
Finally, Steve, in your PRI book, Winning the Water Wars, you make the case that water policy in California should come from the premise of promoting abundance rather than managing scarcity. So if Sacramento had listened to you over the past decade, how would the drought emergency that we're facing today have been different?
Oh, wow. The idea that anyone in Sacramento would listen to me, but some of the things we would be further down the line towards building the projects that need to be built, towards upgrading the infrastructure we already have. Look at what happened at Oroville Dam, the problems on the spillways, the crumbling spillways. Our canals need to be updated. Sites Reservoir, Temperance Flats. These are two projects that have been on the books for years. Shasta Dam is designed to be built, I think, 100 feet taller than it is now. There was a proposal to make it 11 feet taller. I mean, had we done some of these things, we would have more water in reservoirs, because we did have a few rainy years. The desalination plant would be online now, pumping water. The one in San Diego County could meet 9% of that county's needs. I mean, 9% of a 3 million population county that's a lot of water. But anytime we start is good. We just need to move along and start doing these basic projects that promote water abundance, and that's going to help the environment too. I mean, if we fix the Delta project, if we have more water, in the system and we restore habitats, it's a lot more effective than just flushing water through pulse flows through the rivers. So, it's never too late to start. So let's start now.
So if you're interested in Steve Greenhut's book, Winning the Water Wars, you can pick it up on Amazon. It's a great read. And not only is it a great read, actually, it's a beautiful book, and we're very proud of it. Thanks so much, Steve.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
If you like this episode, please tell your friends and subscribe to PRI's podcast at iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeartRadio, and Spotify. And when you're on these platforms, don't forget to give us a big 5 stars. If you don't subscribe to any of these, you can still listen on PRI's YouTube page, youtube.com/Pacific Research 1. That's the number 1. Thanks for listening. I'm Rowena Itchon. Hope you'll come back again for next round with PRI.